Today is Friday, June 13th, 2025, and you have found the Living Youth Podcast. My name is John Robinson. I'm here again with my podcast co-host, Mr. Wallace G. Smith. Mr. Smith, you've been traveling quite a bit lately. Is there anything you want to tell our audience about some of your travels?
Sure. We got to go to Montana. I've never been to Montana before. It was wonderful seeing our congregations there. I know many of them listen to the podcast. Hello to you out there who listen to the podcast. Got to spend some time there with Mr. and Mrs. Brandon Fall, the regional pastor in the area. Also got to stay with some lovely folks. Anyway, hello to all of you. We did some public presentations there that were really fruitful. It's always wonderful to meet people who read the magazine and watch the telecast and then actually come to get to see them in person, interact with them. So it went very well.
Excellent. What do we have that's hot in the news today that we want to talk about?
Well, today, like within the last 24 hours, the nation of Israel has stricken Iran. People were talking about it. It was a bit expected, and it did happen. So when things like this happen in the news, we like to take the time to talk about how to think biblically about such things. And so we're going to look at some Bible-based thoughts on what is going on right now in the Middle East with Israel and Iran.
That sounds great. Going diving deep in the Bible. Always a good idea.
Always a good idea. Israel in the news again. Not enough that there's war going on in Gaza in terms of the ongoing conflict since October of a couple years ago, but now attacking Iran. Actually, Mr. Robinson, all this has happened so fast, and Mr. Robinson has done a wonderful job of trying to put together some of the facts because it's happened so fast. Some of you may not even be listening to the news, may not be aware. Mr. Robinson, can you help set the stage for us?
Well, I figured I needed to know more than Israel has attacked Iran. So I went and collected a few details for our audience. I think this would be good to bring out. Let's see. Launched on early June 13th, 2025, Israel initiated a large-scale military campaign codenamed Operation Rising Lion. Remember that. Involving airstrikes, possible cyber operations, Mossad-led sabotage, and drone raids across Iran. There were over 100 targets that included nuclear enrichment facilities, missile factories, military installations, and residence of senior IRGC commanders. I don't know what that stands for, but it sounds like you didn't want to be one. Israel often targets leadership. Casualties and damage. Israel strikes reportedly killed Major General Hassan Salami, head of the IRGC. We'll skip some specific individuals, some of which were nuclear scientists. Iranian sources estimated 78 plus killed and 329 injured. Explosions were observed in Tehran, Tabriz, and near Natanz, prompting flight suspensions and airspace closures. Iran responded by sending a bunch of drones, but it sounds like Israel shot most of them down. Before the strike, I was listening to some of the just kind of the news observers out there, and real concern that this will not just stay a regional conflict and could spread again, kind of like the Russian-Ukrainian battle could spread. So as you pointed out on the introduction, add yet another potential conflict that could quickly grow out of control.
Wow. So that's a very good summary. And if you've been listening to the news leading up to this, it was already great anticipation something like this was going to happen. The BBC had reported that is possibly what was in the works. You had the United States pulling, say, non-essential personnel kind of out of the region, mentioning to the ambassadors, that is to the different consulates that we have in different areas, they need to kind of prepare for potential difficulty and trouble. And wow, just really stunning, the military capabilities of Israel. What we want to do is jump into this. We know everything's unfolding, and we literally talked in our last podcast about how irritating the 24/7 news cycle can be, and people rushing out with details they don't fully understand. And yet at the same time, the Bible gives us solid things to think that do apply, that aren't going to change. And we see them at play here. So what we wanted to do today is to talk about some biblical elements to all of this that we should be keeping in mind. And by the way, you refer to the IRGC, that's the Revolutionary Guard of Iran. So RG, Revolutionary Guard.
Why is it revolutionary.
And, that's what you see with a lot of these. You had the revolution that took place, and it's kind of like under Castro and such. It's like, when is the revolution over, right? When does that actually happen? But anyway.
Well, just as you're about to go and launch into this, yet again, what's one of the things you and I have been talking about is like how to watch world events and keep them in their proper context. This is yet another example of it would be easy to start reading in everything that's happened here and start trying to force it into the Bible, when this is a good example again also of the importance of just sticking to the big picture key points of what the Bible tells us, and you kind of let go of the details a little bit.
Right, absolutely. People, I can already kind of see it now in the fuzziness of space, as if I can't actually see it. But imagine I can see it now. People are already trying to take Iran and go, fit Iran into different roles and different prophecies. No, just stick with what the Bible consistently says. So that's what we're going to do today. First thing we thought we would highlight is that this emphasizes, as much as we talk about, say, the United States as a major player on the field, we talk about how China seems to be, wanting to be an opponent in terms of world affairs. The rise of Europe, clearly prophesied, to be sure. But never think that the center of history's unfolding is anywhere other than Jerusalem. In the end, all of it will revolve around Jerusalem. And events like today, or what has taken place just this morning as we're recording this, they help to highlight that it's easy to think of, we can sideline the Middle East here or there, but you absolutely can't. The center of all of history as it unfolds eventually is going to be Israel. It's going to be the city of Jerusalem. The prophecy guarantees that, and we should expect that to be the case.
And also, geographically, we take our compass points basically from Jerusalem, right? When there's references to north and
prophetically,
south.
That's right. Prophetically in the Bible, we do. I couldn't help but think of an article by Mr. Gerald Weston in the 2024 January-February issue of Tomorrow's World magazine. Boy, Ms. Robinson, I think you remember it was frustrating for us, at least as magazine publishers, because we had the terrible assault by Hamas in Israel that prompted the war that we still see going on over there, and it happened like the last great day, the 8th day of the festival that we keep in the Living Church of God, and we're all, and whether it's we're traveling, etc. It was right after that we're seeing all this news unfold. And trying to figure out, well, how can we get this in the magazine? Our magazine was literally at the printer. Could we stop the printer? Could we actually change? Because we could write article, we could get something out.
It was too late.
It was too late. We're already printing. It was 500,000 magazines. We couldn't just burn all of that. So we did get a commentary out very quickly. But then we devoted the next issue, which in this case was the January-February 2024 magazine, to the topic. And you had Mr. Gerald Weston, the editor-in-chief of, Tomorrow's World overall, but as well as the presiding evangelist of the Living Church of God, write this article, Masada Shall Not Fall Again, which is a play on a saying there in Israel. And he wrote the following. In that article, he writes, "We then read a prophecy that has been fulfilled time and again over the last 75 years. And he quotes it. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it." That's in Zechariah chapter 12 and verses 2 and 3. And then he continues, "Do we not see that the nations that today surround Israel and Jerusalem are drunk with hatred? Can we not see that the problem of Jerusalem is as a very heavy stone for those who wish to rid themselves of it? And do we not see that all who try to solve the problem or heave it away get cut to pieces?" And I would say almost any attempt at a solution. You looked at the Mr. Trump's first term in office. They had the Abraham Accords, all look so promising. Maybe we can solve this, peacefully. Well, look at Iran. They're kind of hoping to solve things by, we're just having a nuclear arsenal, so that perhaps Israel will have to listen, have to obey, or through their proxies, Hezbollah, etc. All the attempts to solve it in various ways, even Israel's attempts to solve it, whether it's land for peace, things they've tried, it never helps. And I can only imagine, Mr. Robinson, if I were Mr. Trump's administration, they're already more supportive than others are comfortable with concerning the effort in Gaza, though they also have been a bit negative about that as well. And here's just one more thing. Mr. Trump's trying to get, in terms of the United States, certain other priorities, and what's going to happen. They're going to expect him to comment. They're going to expect the administration, do you support, are you behind all of this? Of course, they have denied that there's any U.S. support for this.
Right.
Though at least it used to be hard to imagine Israel ever taking a step without first clearing it with the United States. And here you had the United States definitely preparing its people in some way.
Here was the summary of because it had international reactions, and one was for the United States, which said, and this seems to match other news reports that I've seen, President
President
Trump,
once and future president,
exactly.
In this case. Yeah.
President Trump hailed the operation as excellent and warned of further measures, but the U.S. government officially affirmed it was not involved and emphasized diplomacy and cautioned against Iran attacking U.S. assets. And then some of the other stuff I said, it seems like he's trying to walk this careful line of being supportive of Israel and kind of warning Iran, yet at the same time kind of not really wanting to be a part of it on some level.
Right. It really is amazing to think. Here we are, we're separated by oceans, so many things. And yet, will we ever be completely free of dealing with the Middle East? And prophetically, no. The Middle East will always work its way into world affairs. No powerful government on earth is ever going to be able to just set aside the question of Jerusalem. That prophecy there in Zechariah that Mr. Weston cites in Masada shall not fall again is absolutely, it's going to continue true all the way through the end times.
This actually reminds me of a clip I really like. If I can mention the movie, it was Kingdom of Heaven, and it's an attempt to talk about the Crusades, right?
Movie, yeah.
And legendary general on the kind of Arab Muslim side was Saladin, and they all fight to a standstill, and he's negotiating with the leader of the Christian side, and he decides they're going to surrender. And so the Christian leader asks Saladin, he says, "What is Jerusalem worth?" And he says, "Nothing." And then he walks a few feet, turns around, and says, "Everything." And I thought the dichotomy actually was a pretty good description of like Jerusalem, because it means a lot to Christians, it means a lot to Muslims, and so there's going to be Jews conflict over it.
Absolutely. And you'd think that it's that's really, if only we can get past religion. Honestly, you think all the people that are contending here are purely motivated by religion? It's just anyway. It's a knot you cannot untie, and it will not be untied until Jesus Christ unties it for good. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point we want to highlight is the power of Israeli intelligence, and I'm not talking about IQ. I'm talking about their intelligence systems, their spy networks. It really is stunning. I mean, we have this event in which, let's go backwards. It was less than a year ago. It was September last year, I think. They had that amazing pager / walkie-talkie attack where they worked their way into the actual manufacture of pagers and walkie-talkies that were carried by all of these Hezbollah principals, all these individuals, and ended up, I say simultaneously, it was in a couple of waves, just detonating as an explosive. These pagers and these walkie-talkies killed, I think, at least 30 people, injured hundreds, I think. And the ultimate effect of that wasn't just in terms of killing various ones. It was the idea, the terrifying idea, that this is how close they can get to you. They can literally have you put a bomb in your own pocket.
Yes.
That was a remarkable matter of intelligence gathering and planning.
Yep.
And then you've got this strike, what you just read a while ago, taking out all these facilities, because not only can you find facilities, some of them are obvious, then others not so obvious because the government's involved trying to keep them hidden. But then you've got also these individuals, 4 military generals, 1 politician, and then 2 nuclear scientists. At least we know of those strikes. And those were very personal strikes, which involved having to keep track of the presence and whereabouts of those individuals at all times. And in some cases, individuals who know they've got the equivalent of
target on their back.
target on their back. And the idea that they were aware of where they were second by second to the point that they could land such, because the moment you start such strikes, well, everybody else gets nervous. Everybody starts heading to bunkers or wherever the case is. But to be able to just, in that sense, execute so many individuals all at once, deep in a country that has no love for you in terms of their government, it's just stunning, the level of intelligence forces that Israel has.
Yes, I won't go on about it, but they've been legendary for a while, since after World War II, and they turned it towards, for a long time, trying to find remnants of Germany, the Nazis, especially SS, and then over time that kind of changed towards combating terrorism and some other things. But I'm not even recommending this, but I've read a number of detailed accounts of how they would assassinate somebody, and it was just incredible, like what they pulled off. And then certainly not an endorsement of their operations by any means, but their intelligence is not to be trifled with, and they know a lot of stuff.
Yeah, just because we could talk about, in World War II, the power of the German blitzkrieg or something. We're not really endorsing Nazi forces, but in terms of a world where mankind, because since Adam and Eve, mankind has decided, God, we don't need you, we can take care of our own things, and so we have been essentially like the animals, a world that is red in tooth and claw. I tend to use that so much, but man, Tennyson's quote is just great.
Nails it.
It just really does. So mankind, instead of choosing the divine path to become part of the family of God, we essentially decided to join the animals, and so we too live here in terms of the kingdoms of mankind by being red in tooth and claw. And I'm just so, because I had not read the name of the operation until you did the research pulling that up. Before we read Mr. Weston's quote here from a different article, what was the name of the operation there, Mr.
Operation Rising Lion.
Operation Rising Lion. All right. Here's what Mr. Weston wrote, Mr. Joe Weston, in a different article. This is actually more recent, the 2024 November-December issue, so just the end of last year. It was titled, Ancient Prophecies Are Coming Alive. And he wrote the following: What did Jacob prophesy for the Jews at the end of the age? And he highlights in that article that the Jews, we think of prophecies of Israel, but the Jews are specifically the tribe of Judah. So you have to look at the prophecies that are focused on Judah. And he's talking about the prophecies at the end of Genesis that were given by the patriarch Jacob, who was Israel. And so here is a quote. He quotes them from Genesis 49, verses 8 through 10, about Judah. He says, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? Then he says, the scepter or rulership shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh, Messiah, comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. And that's a quote from Genesis 49, 8 through 10. So he points out, notice also that in the last days, the Jews would wield great military power. Was this a lucky guess by Jacob, or was it inspired by the same God who declares the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things that are not yet done? Let those who have, this is Mr. Weston saying, let those who have eyes to see look at the Middle East today. Do not the Jews have their hands on the neck of their enemies? Are they best not aroused? Dear friends, he says, this has not always been so, but it is today at the end of the age. That prophecy about Judah being a lion that you do not want to rouse, now it's so close. It just makes me wonder, were they even thinking of those prophecies about Judah when they actually named this particular operation?
It does seem to factor in more than you might think.
I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised.
Some of the discussion I saw about the Gaza invasion was starting to cite some biblical scriptures when Israel's take on it. And,
right.
Do you remember that briefly there was the whole idea that let none who breathe remain alive, kind of like that that some felt like, hey, we should just take out all the
Right.
Gaza residents.
Right.
Nobody's recommending that.
No, nobody is. That's right. Okay, so that's just another thing to keep in mind, that this was not the case. I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to go back too far in history, and you do not have a powerful nation of Israel that literally has its hands on the necks of its enemies. That is an end time condition. And that is what you see today. So this is an end time environment in which these prophecies way back in Genesis are talking about. I kind of backed up, I think, a statement I made in one of the two TWPs is that the end times, and then eventually including the millennial reign of Christ that comes after, have been talked about from going back to the book of Genesis. And in this particular case, we have Judah being depicted as a lion's whelp, and you do not want to rouse that lion, and that's exactly what the enemies of Israel have done. So let's move on to a third point, and this one we want to focus on Iran a little bit. It's important not to confuse Iran's government with all Iranian people. I know I saw today in some of the news footage that's coming out this morning after the attacks, a lot of pro-Iran protests in Iran. I say protests. It's not really, if it's for your government, it's not really a protest, I guess, rallies. But in Iran, huge crowds of people all waving Iranian flags. All the flags were about the same size. I got the impression they might have been handed out. But regardless, still, everyone waving their flags in support of, no, go get Israel. We're not going to stand for this. Go and attack. And I'm not trying to say that was completely fake. You know, there definitely could be some real Iranians who do want to, they don't want to see their nation attacked like this. They don't, there were innocents who died in this as well. There's always going to be in something like that. War is ugly. It's not something God ever truly wanted for the world. However, it would be a mistake to think that all Iranians feel that way. The fact is, there are Iranians in, the diaspora, that is, those Iranians, once you had the fall of the Shah, who was originally like a king, essentially, of Iran, whenever you had the revolution, hence the Revolutionary Guard, whenever you had the revolution, you had a lot of Iranians going out into other countries, or they were already there that were not going back. And many of them are pro-Israel in this. They don't like the Iranian government. They don't like this kind of hardcore Islamic government. They long for a time when Iran was more like your Western nations. If you go back and look at photos of Iran in some of those days, you would not recognize it. You would think you were looking at, honestly, 60s America even, or Israel. But not just those. I think I saw a rally in England of such Iranians just filling a street and waving Iranian flags, but old school flags that kind of honored the Shah and such. But then you've also got those in Iran, and you can find that footage if you look for it here and there that are supporting the old Shah, and they do want to see the regime taken out. They don't like the Iranian regime, and they don't like its particular approach to Islam and what it's doing with the people. But of course, they're not out in public. They do that in ways that can't be seen. But even random graffiti you'll see in Iran supporting Israel and supporting the strikes.
Well, I have a couple details I could add to that.
Sure.
I used to have a coworker at this point, that's been at least 15 years ago, and she was born in what we would call Iran. Okay, so I have a point to that. And I was talking to her about it one day, and she immediately clarified to me that she was not Iranian, she was Persian. And it's getting a little dated in my memories, but she made a very clear distinction between those who occupied Iran being in two categories. I think she called them the Arabs and the Persians, and she was Persian, and she did not ever want to be called something else. And she was in the United States because her family fled with the Shah of Iran, which I think for our younger listeners, we might just very briefly mention that the Shah, or the king of Iran, ruled from 1941 till 1979, where there was an Iranian revolution that overthrew him, and that started the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the Shah and his supporters and family fled to the United States, where they were protected. He died in the United States. But he apparently was quite friendly with the West and had modernized Iran quite a bit. But it is easy to look at Iran and think it's just full of Iranians when they themselves would break themselves into two broader categories. And if I'm correct here, the Persians have not been in charge since the Islamic Revolution.
Yeah, that is my understanding as well. When it comes to the actual populations in Iran, the Persians do make up the majority easily. Just quick statistics looking around, that you're looking at anywhere between 55, 65% of the population is Persian versus Arabs. Maybe, oh boy, let's see. This seems so low as to be odd, but maybe 2%. Actually,
Well,
there are a lot of other minority groups as well, but 2%.
I've heard that's actually one of the ironies. Like it was the same in Iraq. Like Saddam Hussein's party was actually a minority.
It's very easy to forget that. I've seen people refer sometimes to Iran and say, "Oh, Arabs this and Arabs that." It's like it is not an Arabic country, and therefore, when we're looking at prophecy, when we're looking at what the Bible says, we have to be looking about the Persians. We have to look at what Persians are doing and how Persians are prophesied to the role that they're prophesied to play in the end times. And even biblically, you look at the history of the people. You go back to the time of Esther, and you read in the book of Esther, and you have the situation with Artaxerxes and Esther and Haman. And at the time, that was the Medo-Persians. That was the Persian people. And just like they intervened to save the Jews at that time. Actually, had no idea. It was a Gentile kingdom. We're just prepared to kill everybody, based on Haman's sort of request, and then based on Esther's intervention and her uncle Mordecai. Then that did not happen. So that's of course very good. But at the same time, in that tale you have a not necessarily antagonistic relationship between the Persians and the Jews. And then later, during the time of the Shah, like as you were referring to, there were Persians in the Shah's cabinet. I mean, not Persians, sorry, of course there were. But there were Jews, if I recall, in his cabinet. They were actually on very friendly terms. Wow. There was not a bad relationship. Mr. Mario Hernandez, evangelist of the Living Church of God, covers all this very well in another article that we have from that same issue as Mr. Gerald Weston's Masada article, because we were very much covering what's going on in the Middle East there. The title of that article is "The True Cause of Trouble in the Middle East." It goes into the actual backgrounds of the people, the biblical backgrounds of the people, and details that are often not paid attention to or people don't keep in mind, whereas the Bible very much talks about these people based upon their original families and tracks those people through their family lineages. So rather than belabor this point very much, I just want to highlight, it's very easy to think of, all the enemies of Israel and kind of lump Iran in there. Well, Iran's government, to be sure, but don't lump all of the Iranian people into that. Biblically, you're looking at the Persian people, and that's what you want to look for in prophecy, is what's expected of the Persians. All right, the fourth thing we wanted to highlight about this is that it's easy to look at the way things are now, look at Israel and the power that it has in the region and the support by the United States. But while we talk a lot about America and the United Kingdom, we talk about the modern nations of Israel in terms of not Judah, that is the United States and Great Britain, and we talk about their power and their eventual fall. We often point to Deuteronomy chapter 28, Leviticus 26, and how the fact that we are not keeping God's laws means that we will fall. It's important to recognize that even though we like to highlight that Israel means the 10 northern nations in prophecy, Judah is not accepted, that actually prophecy does indicate a fall for Judah as well. And that like the U.S. and Britain, the nation of Israel does have a terrible and unprecedented disaster of some sort, multiple calamities perhaps, but great difficulties coming in the future. And again, I want to defer to Mr. Gerald Weston's article that he writes about Masada. He says this, and he was focusing at the time on the beginning of Israel's war in Gaza. He says, how this current war will play out remains to be seen. we know it is not the final battle that will bring about Christ's second coming, as other prophesied events must happen first, according to Scripture. However, there is another prophecy regarding Judah, the Jewish state called Israel, and it has ominous implications. Neither the British descended peoples in the Bible, that's Ephraim, nor their allies, America, in the Bible, that's Manasseh, and Judah, which is the Jews, have obeyed their Creator. Through God's word, though God's word proclaimed by this work has warned them, they refuse to repent and instead choose to live by human precepts. And he cites Hosea 5, verses 9 through 12 to back that up. It says, and the end result, quote, when Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah saw his wound, then Ephraim went to Assyria and sent to King Jareb, yet he cannot cure you, nor heal you of your wound. And that's from verse 13 of Hosea 5. He says, there was a former fulfillment of Hosea's prophecy, and as is so often the case, there will be a latter day fulfillment. At some point in the not-too-distant future, and it could happen during this war, Judah will receive a disastrous blow, a wound worse than anything seen so far. So that's from Mr. Joe West in his article about Never Again, Masada would fall. So it's important to recognize that, while we talk about the power of Israel in the region, there's a time coming when that is going to change, just like for the U.S. and just for the UK. This is not it's not like Israel will continue to remain powerful all the way up to the end times. There is going to be a reversal.
There's one other scripture I might throw in there of something that we should watch for, which is particularly interesting to me because, I just grew up in a United States that was always on friendly terms with England, with the United Kingdom, and Israel, frankly. And they were kind of, looked out for each other. And then as I grew up and I learned about the identity of Israel, that makes all the more sense. But Isaiah 9:21 has a prophecy of the end time that says that Manasseh devours Ephraim and Ephraim devours Manasseh. Together they are against Judah. And the prophecy that predicts that perhaps right there at the end time that they turn on each other. Donald Trump, this is just analysis. I know even mentioning Donald Trump gets controversial immediately, but he doesn't have the same worldview as many of the presidents in the past. He really is a very successful businessman that gained a lot of support, who's now the president, and he doesn't come from the traditional backgrounds. And he just looks at the world a very different way. And he looks at England as just another trading partner that we want to cut a deal with. And he looks at Israel a little bit differently, it seems, than how some of the other presidents have in the past. And he's not been, it would seem, a fan of how Netanyahu is approaching things in the Middle East. And so I wonder if we already see little cracks here and there. I mean, there was already some trouble immediately with England and the Trump administration over trade and how we were going to do things. He's at the very least broken down some traditional boundaries that have been there forever about how the nations deal with each other, and his reluctance to fully support, in my opinion, what Israel's doing over there. I wonder if it's the beginning of the cracks in the relationship between these modern Israelite nations.
Right. We can definitely, it's definitely, and I'd say it's encouraged by some of Mr. Trump's current supporters. They love to see America not treat anybody as a special partner, just us first, right? Mm-hmm. The U.S. first, and who cares about Israel? Who cares about the U.K.? And it's kind of interesting when Mr. Obama was sort of not being, say, supportive of the relationship between the U.S. and Britain and not treating it as something special. A lot of those that would generally consider themselves on the political right were very dismissive of that. They were they really bothered them. And as we had recognized prophetically, there's a connection there, and that was interesting. And now you have, I would say for different purposes, the same kind of dismissal of these relationships. And politically, people feel differently about it. It's like, oh no, that's right. We need to focus on ourselves. We need to do that. It's really interesting how it's not exactly fair weather friend, but how when it comes to people separate from the Bible, people they're just looking at things politically, how what they say just kind of depends on the political circumstance and who is the guy. You can have two political leaders on opposite sides of the spectrum make exactly a very similar decision, and the reactions to it are completely different. That's part of the benefit of looking at things prophetically. You don't care if it's a Republican. You don't care if it's a Democrat. Rather, what you see is the overall effect and how it plays into the arc of prophecy. Let's move on to the last point that I think we'll cover today and what we have in mind watching what's going on. And this seems very general, but it is very important. And that is this, that the world is not yet in its end time configuration, but it is moving in that direction. We talked about some of these things, and I think the last podcast, we talked about it actually a few podcasts ago as well. But there's so many things going on right now. The distance that you're seeing arising between the United States and so many of its traditional allies, which Mr. Robinson just referred to. Even the tension you see in the United States over illegal immigration, what's going on right now in Los Angeles and other places. You look at Germany taking a commanding lead in Europe and fast-tracking a military. It's just hard with World War II still in memory to imagine a time when all of Europe would be kind of rooting Germany on, hey, get a military. Let's get going.
Huge change not to be overlooked.
Absolutely not. And then you've got, don't dismiss the Roman Catholic Church and its growing confidence. I would say confidence and even popularity.
Yes.
So many reports talking about double-digit percentages of people from the youngest generations, in terms of Generation Z and such, flocking to the Roman Catholic Church. You have the Middle East, as we're kind of discussing today, experiencing great power shifts, the dynamics clearly in play, where old players can't be presumed that they are still going to be a part of the game coming. And then the Eastern powers, whether it's a Japan, you see Japan actually flexing some military muscle recently, trying to show, hey, look, we've got an army too, we've got a military. There is so much going on. It's almost like you see the way the world was as a bunch of eggs and God cracking some eggs.
Yes.
And he is working on some kind of, I don't know, Mr. Robinson, if it's an omelet or a souffle. I got to admit, I don't know all the things you can make with eggs. However, God knows what he's making way more than I know about eggs.
That's funny.
And the key in all of this is not to get too picayune about trying to predict the fine details of what's going to happen.
Right. Exactly.
But to keep an eye on the overall trends with an eye towards the arc of prophecy.
Right. You and I grew up in a world where you could look at the chessboard and see a lot of pieces that with a few moves could be in an end time configuration. And it just feels like several of these pieces are on the move, or being moved into place, depending on how you want to look at it. It is, from my perspective, some of these things that the church has talked about, my 40 years of adulthood, are in the process of happening or hanging on the cliff. Like things really are moving in a way that they just didn't for the last. I mean, I look back now and realize that the 1990s was probably the safest decade we've ever had. And I remember that's when I was starting to really get in, read the prophetic booklets and read Revelation, the Mystery Unveiled, and start to realize how close we were to the end time. And so I would look at the news and think, oh, what's going on here? And now I look back and I'm like, nothing. Things were very peaceful, and the economy was booming. And so, but things are very, very different now than they were in the 90s.
They really are. And that helps to illustrate why you have to avoid, as tempting as it is, trying to take the news and all the time just cram the news into the Bible, because the news is going to change. Things are going to happen. Things are going to be different. But the prophecies of the Bible are consistent. Never bet. Mr. Weston even said this on a telecast that's coming out. I just reviewed yesterday. Never bet against the Bible. Always bet on the Bible. No matter what the news is doing, no matter which direction everything is going in, always bet on the fact that what the Bible says is exactly what is going to happen. Just give it time. We've mentioned several articles today in the podcast. We will make sure on our website, livingyouth.org, to link to those articles. If you've never paid attention to prophecy before, I can't think of a better time to jump in and start paying attention. And those articles would give you a great entry point, if you would, into the world of prophecy.
Smith and Robinson.